everyone, and thank you for joining us today for Deepwatch's webinar, Advance Your Healthcare Security Maturity. We have with us today Chris Gray and Rich Weimer from Deepwatch, who have a great session prepared for you guys. So I will go ahead and pass it over to those guys to get us started.
Hello, Mr. Gray. How are you today, sir?
Doing well. How are you, Rich?
I'm doing good. Thanks for, I'm excited to chat today. We've got a little bit of time on this webinar to talk about how we can help our, help companies in the healthcare space advance their security maturity, right? So this is something that, I get excited about. My past life, spent some time in the healthcare industry. I know you yourself have a background in there as well. So I know this is all near and dear to our hearts, right? Before we get started, though, I'm going to do some introductions, let people know who we're talking about. Turn it over to you. Let everybody know who you are.
Absolutely. So, hello, everybody. Chris Gray, AVP of Security Strategy for Deepwatch and a member of the field CTO team. I've split my career almost 50-50 between being on industry as well as being on the consulting side of the house. And one of those points that I worked there was build a healthcare consulting practice for a very large security consultancy, and spent several years of my life not only trying to understand the issues that existed within that platform, but also trying to help them address their governance, risk, compliance, and technology concerns and how they could better fulfill their base mission.
Awesome. And I am Rich Weimer. I am one of the enablement program managers here at Deepwatch. I get excited about this, not just because I have a history in this, but this is one of those few industries where the impact of our work is genuinely really meaningful beyond just the financial aspects of it, right? And the downtime of a standard business, right? The healthcare space, we really do have people's lives on the line, right? I always joke about when I prioritize things, we don't have, we're not flying the organs in, it's not that big of a deal, we'll be okay. But this is one of those scenarios when there are issues, it all boils down to this is, at the end of the day, we're here to help keep people alive, right? There's nothing more important than that, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. No, I mean, healthcare is a business, and we all understand that. There are financial concerns, there's business concerns on it, but at the end of the day, for most healthcare organizations, if you ask them what's your number one focus, it's preventing loss of life. So it's kind of hard to get much more real world and impactful than that.
Yeah, and once they get outside of that, not only are these a lot of these places, money-making entities, obviously there's financial ends to that too, but really at the core, beyond just keeping folks alive these days, it's all about driving improved patient experiences, right? Like everybody's pushing to get better. And with that, it's kind of bringing in some new issues that the healthcare space really hasn't had to address before, right? Like gone are the days where you get the little hand-scribbled doctor's note. Everything's collected from a data standpoint. Everything's organized. Everything sits in the in a server or a cloud somewhere, and it needs some level of security, right? So this is a very fast changing way of doing things. There's the massive value-based care initiative where we're really starting to track what's being said, what's being done, all the different tools that go along in doing that to really drive the growth in the healthcare space and really betterment of this place. So it's bringing in some interesting challenges to the healthcare organizations as things continue to evolve.
That's been growing consistently. We'll go back to the High Tech Act of 2009 when this came out, where we really started looking at beyond just the security aspects, but into the privacy aspects that cover it. It's been updated multiple times since. But in the world that we live in anyway, you've had privacy concerns that have popped up. GDPR, we all know about it, CARES Act. I mean, all these bits and pieces that are popping up. To your point, it's not just what it was, it's continuously evolving. And as we have, I'm going to call the last few years out because the pandemic has changed the face of the world and everything that we do. But as we've done all these things together, healthcare has also translated into availability of information and care, and that's caused us to shatter all the perimeters and do things in ways that 5 years ago, no, I would never do that. That's a bad idea. Why would I even consider it? Well, now it's business as usual, and everyone's struggling to keep up.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's struggling to keep up. Everybody's going through some level of digital transformation, right? Mm-hmm. It expands beyond just HIPAA, right? You hear HIPAA, like, oh, they're HIPAA compliant. They must be secure. Everything's all good. They got things locked down. And it's going beyond just personal information, but all the ways that we're gathering that, right? And when we look at the evolving threat landscape, I think you had a statistic in your head that you mentioned before, like how fast just the devices in general in the healthcare facilities, those alone are growing exponentially year over year, right?
Well, so one of the recent points that came out is every hospital bed right now has an expectation that they have somewhere between 10 and 20 internet accessible devices. Whether they're being used internet accessibly or not, the availability is there. It may be turned on by default. You've got to play with it. And the expectation is that that's going to grow by roughly 20% a year. And, personal anecdotal story, used to run a attack and penetration team on the regular, and we were sitting outside of a major medical center, and we actually busted in from a McDonald's across the street before we ever officially started, because they had old insulin pumps running a completely depreciated, wireless protocol. And it took all the time of seeing that come up, pulling that signature, and doing a Google search for default username and password. And suddenly I'm on their patient care network. This stuff is real. It's been real for a while, but the point being, it's proliferating. It's something that's going on more and more. And unfortunately, or fortunately, the attacker space is growing. This is becoming more of a commoditized business to make money off of it. And the tools are requiring, in many cases, far less skill to actually exploit. The old script kiddie joke. Now it's the app, just the app user. I have it, I click the button, the computer does it for me, and I don't even need to understand the tech stack to let it happen.
Yeah, and as you say, kind of broke in from McDonald's across the street and getting access from one of our, one of the world's favorite franchises, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, outside of even a healthcare system itself, like we all have access to that data now, right? Like look at all the mobile health tools, all the different portals. So just from an evolving, threat landscape, this is probably one of the most, highly targeted, one of the most highly coveted sets of data you can get your hands on, and it's available all different types of ways. Like there's no shortage of ways to get your hands on it, which is tough. And if they do get it, we mentioned obviously prioritizing loss of life, making sure that we're keeping people healthy, keeping systems online. The financial impacts of these things, right? Ransomware.
Financial and the reputational aspects cannot be discounted. You go and do a quick search on the web right now about what source of personal information illicitly gained to sell for the most. Healthcare data, PHI, it's right at the top from the perspective of, again, it's highly sought after because of what I can do downstream with it very rapidly.
Yeah, and I mean financially, right? As healthcare organizations, they have to spend certain amounts of dollars on care, and they only have certain amount for operational costs. And these, they don't want to be hit with these large financial hurdles, especially from this attack vector, right? Where no organization's got the kind of money sitting around for something that's going to hit them for millions and millions of dollars at any given point. There's a lot on the line there, and it's not something that you can't just sweep these things under the rug. News travels fast everywhere these days, right? Especially when we're, hearing about someone got popped somewhere. I think you hear almost daily all the different attacks that are going on, and the reputational impact for a health organization is huge. You're not talking just one or two people that are impacted, and that reputation issue hits you for you're going to lose a customer, right? Like you could lose, towns, you can use states, countries globally. I mean, this is all over. This has a big impact when it comes to the
I read a recent article where a gentleman was saying that he remembered sitting with the CEO of a very large healthcare center here in the United States, and the quote was, a couple of years ago, he got done delivering his message, and the CEO turned around, looked at everyone else in the room, and said, "Did anyone understand what this guy was saying?" Same situation, another board meeting presenting recently, and the CEO turned around and said, "Short of catastrophic natural event, I can think of nothing outside of cybersecurity that could have an immediate impact in the ability to knock us offline, unable to do business for weeks, if not months, than cybersecurity." When you consider that, that's a seismic shift in A to B, and only a few years of difference in the middle. And it just very much identifies how critical these aspects are. Patient care, saving lives, all that can be completely ended with one ransomware scenario.
Yeah, I was just reading something earlier this week, like from 2020 to 2021, ransomware attacks are up 90 something percent, I think 40 something percent in the US alone. And with your number one priority being, keeping people alive at all costs, right? This is causing all kinds of new issues beyond just the financials, right? I believe in that same article, they were talking about a lady that is now suing that hospital system because during that ransomware attack, her newborn was in the nursery, couldn't get the care it needed, and unfortunately had to pass away. So these are real world impacts for the outcome, the unfortunate outcomes of a lot of these attacks can be pretty far reaching and pretty impactful for individuals.
We laugh at someone getting their website defaced, but
yeah,
this is a completely different category.
Yeah, and they've all got that same issue, right? Like they're all fighting that same thing, and it's continuing to get more and more complicated. As we're looking at the issues that these places are having beyond just trying to keep people alive, constantly struggling to improve the quality of the care that our individuals are getting, also while still managing the basics, right? When they're looking at their I guess going beyond HIPAA, right? Making sure that people are logging in. We have a lot of frontline workers in the hospital systems. There's a lot of training, all kinds of things that go into even just establishing the basics of this stuff, right? And I don't know if you want to talk about what those basics are even, right? What should some of these companies be doing to just minimum?
So we look at what are the negative consequences. We covered most of the ones I'm going to look at. There's obviously loss of life, and then there's the penalties that come out from the bad exposure. That could be financial, that could be reputational, which in many cases obviously leads to more financial. There's a hospital across the street from the hospital, down the street from the hospital kind of a model. There's in many cases, no shortage of opportunities. So when we're looking at some of the common issues that healthcare faces, some of what I'm going to call common issues have evolved, and they're becoming more critical based on where we are. But the same old candidates are there. The basics, basic security protocols and hygienes tied into the compliance obligations that they've got. We all know healthcare is a highly regulated space. Touching on the breaches, a lot of the concerns from CISOs in the space is that, or I should say one of the major is that because the breaches are happening, because there are more of them, that is going to lead to what can either be looked as a knee-jerk reaction or an appropriate reaction, that more regulation, more compliance obligations are going to be forthcoming, which is going to make the day-to-day job even worse. So those are common issues of how do I deal with the basics? How do I deal with these compliance issues when I have, again, like we said, limited budget, limited staff, have to fight to retain people like everyone does right now. How do I do this? With a limited staff, and a decentralized service model, you have to accept the fact that the majority of the people in the hospital are not IT. They're not security aware. They're caregivers, they're janitorial staff, whatever you want to say, but they're not someone who regularly puts their fingers on a keyboard and understands what security means. They trust that the security department's taking care of that. And that, in many cases, is a great thing. I have a centralized security model. I have hopefully a minimization of shadow IT. I've got control over my controls. That's great. But that also causes those frontline workers to stop caring about it, not be as aware of it as much. And it puts all the weight on the tech stack and the capability of your security people. And again, back to that, it's hard to keep people. It's a limited budget. It's hard to keep people involved. And the more responsibility they have, the more pressure is on them, the more they may want to seek greener pastures somewhere where it's just not as high a stress. This is a significant issue. So security training. How do I make all those people my frontline security admins? How do I ensure that I'm breaking this centralized responsibility model, at least from the perspective of I need you looking for problems so that I don't have to catch all of it. Device integration. We talked about those 20 devices. Hey, can they integrate? Do I have the technical capability? Do I have the platform? Do I have the knowledge to actually be able to bring that telemetry in to turn it into data, which then I can turn into actionable intelligence? What does this mean? And when we stretch that out, my infrastructure is not just me. It may be me across 6 different, co-locations, campuses, whatever you want to call it. I may be a medical university where I have a university system and I have a hospital and I have all these pieces. Or more than likely, I definitely have a huge supply chain and support service chain that I have to dig into. So making all these things talk to one another, again, very important, and understanding why it matters. Last but not least, I'll talk on the safety blanket, the fallback, the backstop of, well, what happens when something bad happens? Ooh, I have insurance. I'm so glad I have insurance. Insurance is a business model. They are working through this as well. I'm not talking bad about them all at all. It's what we have to do to keep our doors open. the insurance industry is evolving around cyber insurance. And part of that translates into they're charging more, they're requiring to see more, and they're denying more claims based on the fact that proper hygiene was not being done. That is an incredible moving target for someone who, again, does not have this significant cyber team that's able to stay up to date. I'm having a hard enough time staying up with HIPAA, high tech, high trust, take your pick where it would go, without having to continuously reevaluate, am I still insured and am I going to get paid at the end of the day? And again, like you said, I don't have a war chest to pay millions and millions of dollars of lawsuit damages, but the scenario is there. And now I have to be really cautious about what I'm doing so that that safety blanket that I'm relying so much on will be there on the day when I'm standing in front of a judge.
Yeah, it's the last thing you want to do is, especially as you're budgeting this out, when you're looking at cyber insurance, you don't want to be the one caught holding the bag at the end of the day, right? And it's definitely a complicated situation. And talking about devices, it extends far beyond just the badge in, badge out on just the computer systems, right? As just had a kid not too long ago, and you sitting there for a lot of hours, right? You get to look at all the different things that are poking around in those small rooms, right? And I remember looking at one particular machine and thinking, man, this thing looks like it's it's been around a little bit, right? So it's not always just the latest, greatest, cutting edge material like devices. You've also got to plan for some of that legacy stuff. And what really drove home on kind of how old that thing was is my youngest daughter, my oldest daughter now likes watching Full House and seeing that device on a Full House episode. They were definitely not planning for the security landscape that we have these days that far back, right? So not only are we attacking the latest and greatest of all the systems that we have to go plan backwards in time too, for all the various tools and ways of threat actors can access your system these days as well.
I can point to hospitals and I can point to education centers where I can almost map the evolution of the internet over the last 20 years by what their environments look like, because I'm building a new network. I'm going to retire the old one, but when I get the new one up and things moved over, hey, I could still use that space to accomplish X, Y, and Z. And so I'll keep it up. That's great. The money's already spent. They're there. But from a security threat landscape, Windows NT is a wonderful box, but it hasn't been supported in years. It's not being patched, and the bad man is still knocking on the door. So it's absolutely a perspective to keep in mind. If it's not broke, don't fix it. When you have limited budgets, you can't afford to replace it. So we'll keep it here and let it do its job. But again, from a vulnerability management perspective and a visibility, that can be such a hard road.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are kind of some of those legacy issues, right? I mean, I know if I was in the healthcare space, these are the things that, if I was a CISO or in the security business, these are things that would keep me up at night, right? We've obviously gone through, what people would call an unprecedented last couple of years, right? It's been a little crazy, right? For all of us, right? It's been a little nuts. Healthcare obviously being a big piece of that. What are some of the emerging issues that these places need to focus on these days, right? Like, so hard to play catch up on where we're at, but the buck doesn't stop there, right? It's continuing to propose new or bring us new solutions that we need to solve for. What are some of those emerging things you're starting to see or thinking about as well?
Sure thing. So everyone's talking to everyone now about what matters in 2022. And amusingly enough, it'll be a surprise to no one, the same topics are brought up regardless of your industry, but the priority at which they're brought up is in many cases significantly different. And it has a lot to do with a lot of criteria. In the healthcare space, one of the biggest, there are a couple of biggies, but one of the biggest is the proliferation of access. Again, I said it before, I'll say it again. We've shattered our holy perimeters in the name of mobility, interoperability, communication, all this. And that's not a bad thing. That's an expectation. That is the world now. However, when the platform was built that way and we don't have the capability to lift and shift and bring in an entire new tech stack and a new set of capabilities, I'm now working on legacy systems that were never intended to be exposed to that way in a proliferation of access. So we're going to call this up to data gathering, data presentation, and security around that. The telehealth, the medical portal system. To take your pick how we're going to do this. The information sharing platforms where you can submit. I moved about a year ago, and it was amusing to me that I had 5 different portals to sign up for almost immediately for my common care provider. This is great, but this is also terrifying for the people who are responsible for this, because again, I architected much of this on the fly. That doesn't mean I did a bad job, but it may mean that I really had to utilize architectures that were put out by vendors and everything else on this, and that may not map beautifully into where I'm at, so I'm having to put a lot of trust. But I have the ability for people to give me data that I don't want. I have the ability to accidentally send people data that I don't want. It's all over the place. But once I accept that data, intentional or not, I become the caretaker. I become the custodian of that data in terms of, privacy lingo, and I'm required to secure it. I can outsource the security around it, but I cannot outsource the responsibility for it, because I accepted it, that became mine. So data gathering and security, telehealth, ubiquitous presence, whatever you want to call it, omnichannel, this matters. This is big stuff, and it's everywhere. And everyone in healthcare, I don't know that I've had a doctor's appointment in the last 6 months where I actually went to see a doctor, as opposed to it was a telehealth visit.
Yeah.
This is common, and the information that we're talking about, like I said, personal health information, personally identifiable information, whatever you want to call it, this stuff is worth gold. Another huge one that's out there right now is the entire third-party chain, third and fourth party, if you will. If COVID taught any of us anything, is that there's a lot of stuff that we don't want to be good at. It's too much work. It's never something that's going to necessarily give me money back. So I should find someone else to do it for me. Let them be good at what they're good at. Let me consume the outcomes, and we'll all be happy. In the healthcare industry, that's being brought up by everyone, that I have so many partners that I'm sharing data back and forth with, that I don't even necessarily know what they do, and how can I control this? How can I manage this? Third-party risk management's always been an issue. I was working with clients on that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But the point is, right now in healthcare, it's an open wound, if you will. Again, talking about how we're going to triage this, it's something that they're all caring about. Staffing. Yeah. This is the bane of us all right now. A lot of companies have got big war chests of money because no one traveled for 3 years, and now we're able to use that to hire. We're stealing from one another, within industry, without industry, consulting, to wherever we go. There's a new job for everyone every day, and everyone seems to be able to offer 2 more days of vacation and $5,000 more than I'm paying. And when you see that enough, it encourages jumping. So it's really difficult to find, hire, train, maintain, retain all these people. And you can build the world's greatest security program, but if you've got a revolving door and all your practitioners are leaving every 10 days, you don't have a security program. You have a bunch of paper that really has no teeth. So, that's a huge one. What else?
To add to that staffing piece, right? If you drive through any major city, you see all the large hospital system buildings, right? It's an industry that's very used to having everybody co-located in a single area. So this move to remote work was proposing a lot of new issues for these organizations that they just haven't been used to doing, right? And the talent that they're trying to attract, right? I know we've seen it in my area. Organizations are struggling to staff specifically because they can't bring people here because they don't want to co-locate. They want to work remote, and you're seeing talent just kind of peeled off to all these different other opportunities, and it's getting increasingly difficult. That's kind of like a self. That feeds to the next issue of the people that are in the industry are just so overworked because they're just getting hammered nonstop because they don't have just the size of the teams to actually do the work that they're here to do. So it's kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy of one thing leads to another after the next. It all definitely snowballs or steamrolls downhill, I should say.
The old joke about if I could go back in time 20 years and tell myself something, it used to be, invest in Microsoft, Apple, and Amazon. Given the last 3 years, I have now added Zoom and any remote access technology to that list, because, man, if we only would have known. But you're right on the money. And so let's expand upon that. Let's take that one step further. I've got new capabilities, necessarily old technology. I've got limited visibility. I've got staffing issues where people are coming and going in and out. I'm having to change the way I do business, but I still got to do the basics. One of the big issues, it's always been a big issue. We've talked around it a lot, but let's talk about response. Let's talk about how do I minimize my threat landscape and how do I deal with it when the bad day comes. I am a member of the security nihilist landscape that says I have to assume the hack is inevitable and that I will have that day. So with that being said, extended networks, interoperability, legacy systems, third parties, all this stuff that I've got going on. How do I manage my vulnerability space? How do I know what I can be attacked, prioritize those events, monitor heavily what needs to be monitored, treat what I can treat, put compensating controls around what I can't? How do I do that? And then, you know, the day when we get the notification that, oh, by the way, you're healthcare, you just got breached, it affected more than 500 people, that is now a reportable case that you have to go to, you know, put out there in the open for everyone to see. Great. What is my incident response capability? And does it extend across my landscape and into my partner ecosystems? And did we set up SLAs in our contracts and all these kind of expectations to where they know they are on the hook? I did extend the responsibility to them. It's still mine, but I put in place what I need to be able to force them to take action and force them to take responsibility for their own poor processes. This is the kind of stuff that, again, it's not new. None of it's new. We've been doing this for years and years and years, but it's taken on improved criticality because, again, I'm out there. I've put myself in business propositions, in business situations that I would never have done. Find me anybody. I know they're out there. As the minute I say this, someone will come go, oh, me. But it's almost the one to find me anyone who's not in the cloud, either themselves or from a SaaS perspective. It's becoming a pretty small grouping of people that do this.
Oh yeah, digital transformation is real, right? Like it is in every area of every business now, and it's definitely forcing a lot of these legacy industries to adopt quick and fast, and really, you know, hope and, you know, in some instances kind of pray that they're doing it accordingly and not leaving themselves open to too much, right? So
we live in a ready, fire, aim world right now. We're hoping that we establish ROI based on, I'm afraid, luck as much as planning these days. It's getting better, luckily, but there were, like you said, a couple of years where, man, I need, and off we went.
Yeah. So these are, you know, obviously a lot of the common issues that are in healthcare. You know, a lot of this reaches across many industries, right? And I think there's a number of those emerging ones that we're talking about, from gathering, security, staffing, that get really kind of hit home in supply chain, right? I mean, there's, I mean, just look at medication in general, right? It's hitting all over the place. So the masks, right? I mean, when COVID first hit, you could spend $10, $20, $30 on a mask, right? Talk about crazy supply chain constraints. It's all over the place, right? It's pretty nuts. So, you know, in the vein of how do you start putting yourself in a place to solve some of these things, right? Like, we know we're trying to save lives, we're trying to improve care, we're also trying to be mindful of our budgets because we do have limited operational, you know, capabilities and budgets, right? What are some things that, you know, you're seeing or you think when it comes time to fix these things? How are we solutioning that stuff? How would you recommend that, if you will?
Yeah, so let's go back to the problems. We're doing things we've never done and we don't necessarily know what's happening. That to me translates into improved visibility and baselining. The ability to detect anomalous activity is every bit as important as the ability to prevent it, because malicious users, hackers, whatever you want to call them, that's a business, and they're like any good virus that's out there. The minute we put up a wall, they will find a way to walk around it or go over it or under it, whatever it may be. Useful example in the healthcare industry. But we've got to be able to get our hands around that. Another one, let's talk about the staffing issue. We know it's there. We cannot rely on technology alone. It will not get us there. We're not there yet. So how do I deal with the fact that I need a large number of skilled, trained, maintained resources in a world where, to put it bluntly, I'm saying goodbye as often as I'm saying hello? Maximizing the ROI. These healthcare organizations, all their legacy networks, all the spend they've done historically, they don't have a big budget. They've got to find a way to do everything I've talked about thus far with what they've got, minimizing expense and maximizing outputs and outcomes. That's a big one. And then let's just say capability and efficiency. I've got to take what I've got and turn it into something that matters, that is meaningful. So unpacking those a little bit from a visibility and baselining, do I have the right intelligence? Do I have the right data? Am I pulling the right telemetry? Am I conditioning the knowledge that I'm getting that in a way that I'm not just sucking in noise for the sake of sucking in noise? Recently talked to a client and they told me, yeah, I'm 6 terabytes of data a day. And I'm looking at them going,
how much?
If you're over 250 gigs a day, I really have to wonder about you. What are you doing? And the answer is debug all. They were sucking every possible login. And that's not a bad thing, the better data that we have, but it's an expensive thing, and it slows processing, and it increases the number of tickets that my team has. It takes that whole staffing and capability model and puts it into rocket speed. So when you're dealing with that, do I have the right model? You know, we at Deepwatch, we kind of talk about 5 pillars. Do I have the right sources? Do I have the appropriately curated content? Am I applying that content to my assets in a way that is risk aware, so that it's my crown jewels that I'm watching? It's the things I really care about that I'm focusing on. And to put it bluntly, are those the right ones in the first place? The next one we get up to is, are my people and my platform able to do what I need them to do? And last but not least, am I continuously improving on my capabilities? When you look at that visibility and that baselining, it touches all of those. And it's a big deal that you've got to find a way to get to, so that, again, I'm turning a plethora of data into actionable intelligence. I'm reducing the alert overload, all those bits and pieces, to where I can make a difference. Staffing, more and more people are learning that I don't want to be good at things that I don't need to be good at. It costs too much. I'm not good at it. I'm spending money. I'm dwindling away my political capital with the board, with whoever that is, on something that at the end of the day, it matters to me, but I don't want to do it. That doesn't mean I don't do it. I can't do it, but maybe it means I go look for somebody else. That's something we're seeing very heavily in a lot of the spaces, healthcare being absolutely one of the leading spaces on that. I don't want to do frontline SecOps. I don't necessarily want to do frontline security work. I want my people focusing on things that are happening in my environment that require that really deep knowledge level. I want them focusing on my compliance objectives that, again, I could pay a consultant $300 an hour to do this, or I got Bob sitting over here who's been here forever and knows the systems, can play this with me. It's what he likes to do. Let's, you know, what can you do to give me my people back while giving me the outcome that I need? That's an incredibly meaningful point that people are looking for. ROI, there's got to be a Rosetta Stone. There's got to be something that can sit between these legacy systems and the platforms that we're trying to use now to enable us to be more timely, more impactful, more meaningful. What is that? How can I get there? How can I do the things that I need to do? And this really digs into, in most cases, either do I want to become a software development shop? Answer is probably not. Or do I want to try and find something that will do this for me in a way that requires, hopefully, a minimal amount of normalization and manual mapping and constant translation? I use that Rosetta Stone. I want to take the Rosetta Stone, put it in a computer, and have the computer do all the programming and the translation, not me every day having to go, squiggly fish is an A, triangle with a dot on top is a Q. I don't want to do this. So that is something that, you know, that they've got to play with. Companies now have got to address that on how am I going to get my platform. And the flip side of that, a tool is just a box with blinky lights. It enables a process. And if you don't have a process, then any ROI you get out of it's going to be highly doubtful, highly questionable. You've got to have the people element that can step in there and say, here's how I'm going to work this, make this accessible, usable, meaningful. Automation is great. We're doing great things with automation, machine learning, artificial intelligence, all that. But the thing that we have to be aware of the fact is the people element's not gone, and it's something that's absolutely required. And last but not least, let's talk efficiency. This is one of the things that's one of Deepwatch's claim to fame. You take a look at some data sets that are out there that were professionally curated to help SecOps organizations do their job. There's one that's out there called the Boss of the SOC data. You know, 223, I believe, million events, 50 gigabyte data set, over 100 sources over this period of time. If you run that through just a setup SIM model, it's about 19,000 reportable events in a quarter. Tell me who's got the time to be able to run through 19,000 events. And I'll say nobody to do it well. One of the big alerts, you know, the big problems right now is what we call, you know, alert fatigue. I'm getting too much stuff. I can't do it. I don't know that I don't feel that what I'm doing is of any value because I'm spending all day staring at screens and I just can't tell. Okay, so we step that up. We invest in a SOAR platform where we're doing enrichment of data. That is a huge increase. That's that takes us from roughly 1% true positive to about 10. So instead of 1 in 100 things I do are meaningful, it's 1 in 10. But I don't necessarily have context because I'm seeing the onesie twosies. So yes, that one came across, but I don't know what was the predecessor or the successor to it. So what do I do here? And again, same people have 3-day jobs. I don't have necessarily the time. It's pushing the problem. The problem did not go away. One of the things that we've been working on for years that we've really kind of practiced and maximized, we've got our maturity model, which is a patented bit of truth that we use to help our clients understand what matters, why does it matter, and what order should you put it in place, how do we maximize the value we can deliver to you. But on top of that, we've got threat analytics capabilities where now I'm looking at these events, I'm applying the prioritization of it, I'm taking this out, I'm running it through Cortex, I'm enriching it, I'm suppressing details that don't matter, I'm not getting rid of them, I'm just suppressing them, I'm pushing them down and watching them over time. And where it makes sense, I'm normalizing them and linking them together where I see a chain of events. So now these 3 things that didn't matter for the first 15 days, on day 21, a 4th one gets added. This goes from the internet's a pen test, the internet's a pen test, admins do strange things, to someone was failing to log in, someone created a weird account, someone was pinging from the box, and on this day they're running some kind of command line shell activity. It looks like they're trying to not just enumerate, but move within my environment. Oh, that's not unrelated. That's an attack string. And this is something that we have to respond to. What's this doing? Again, using us as an example, this has now gotten me down from 19,000 alerts down to 300. This has now got me from the 1 or the 10% true value to over 50%. 1 and 2, hey, Chris, that's still not that good. That's a whole lot better than 1 in 10 or 1 in 100. And to put it bluntly, as we're talking about the staffing, the familiarity with your organization, as we get to know your environment better, or as you get to know your environment better, that number will go up because we'll see false positives that look real and we can recognize them and move them on. So I mean, these are the things that folks have got to do.
Yeah. And I was going to say, we talked earlier about budgeting, right? Like, I think security really went through that area at that time where buying a lot of tools to throw at these issues and really not getting the most out of them, right? And then you buy these tools that you kind of know you need, you think you need, but you don't really know what you're getting from them. You don't really know the ROI. You couple that with, not having the team that you would like, so you're probably missing the specialists in those particular tools, right? And then, when you bring in these types of solutions, you can kind of start making sense of all that, right? You kind of get that expertise in the right places. You really start understanding what you're seeing from these, and then it helps, and ultimately tying it back to the dollars and cents of this thing, right? You're not just kind of blindly going back to your leadership or your board and saying, I need these dollars to do, I don't know. But this is actually helping you quantify those and show the ROI and why it is meaningful to invest in these things too. So it's not just the, we're going to do more with it, but helping you from a business standpoint to really make sense of your security spend goes a long way, because as we said, you're dealing with limited budgets. You're dealing with, you have to spend money, and you can only spend it certain ways and only so much of it. So it's a big piece of that puzzle too.
Like I said, the ability, we recognized from the beginning that the common model of follow the sun 24/7 exists in different hemispheres and all that. We recognized early that that's a dangerous platform. That's a dangerous way to do it, in our opinion, because that means I'm having to make people come to me. That means I'm having to force them to sit in the SOC or whatever this is. And some of the great talent that we have out there, they live in Montana, or they live or in, wherever the Bangalore, wherever it may be that you don't have a presence. And the end result of that being, you're needlessly limiting what you can do with your stuff, as well as I don't want my customers, I don't want my healthcare people having to realize, I talked to Rich this morning, and then this afternoon he did a handover. Now I'm talking to Chris, and Chris really doesn't know my environment. And later this afternoon, I'm going to get handed off to Neil, and Neil's not going to know this either. We chose to do a model where we use named squads, the people that are there, who's going to be on work at 2 o'clock in the morning. They've been working with you this whole time. The point of that one being, they are familiar with your environment. We recognize that familiarity does not breed contempt. Familiarity breeds the ability to be rapid and respond, to shift left on your response time aggressively. And that's something that, these healthcare organizations, they kind of need. They don't need a bunch of people that they're having to re-explain the issue to every 8 hours. They need someone who knows what's going on, that's an extension of their team, and that extends their team, builds their own team up from a knowledge perspective across the board, brings a complete capability so that, again, that healthcare CISO, he or she is simply consuming outcomes and has confidence that, well, these people actually know what they're talking about because they don't send me these alerts. They know what's going on, where I'm at. They know what my major concerns are. They know what matters the most. And at the end of the day, I feel confident that I'm not going to be wasting my time by looking at this, and that I'm going to see what matters.
No, absolutely. So bringing that all together, it's a lot going on, right? It's a lot of things that keep you up at night. We talked kind of how we look at solutioning things. You think maybe take a couple questions? What do you think? We got some time to do? Okay. Yeah, no, we got a couple here. Let's see. So the first one is, my team is consistently spending all their time triaging possible events. I'm convinced we are missing what matters. How can we improve our timelines? And I think this speaks to really what you were just talking about, right? But if you can drive that home for this person.
Sure. So my first real job in the security industry was sitting behind a desk staring at 6 screens as data flew by from a firewall management perspective. I told my boss this: I'm not really sure why you've hired me to do this job, because I have no confidence that I'm seeing anything. I don't, again, to use the example I used before, this is data. It's not intelligence because I can't process it. So what do you need to do to get past the noise and make it things that you can work with? We talked about a lot of it already. You need to make sure that you have the right data, that you've got what matters. And as you get better at all the other things that will follow, you can bring in more data, but focus on what's going to get you across that first finish line so that you're processing appropriately, you're seeing the right things. And you have to consider all the other things. That just because you can get data does not mean that it's usable, does not mean that there's not huge amounts of overlap that have to be normalized. I mean, you've got to make sure that you're getting it, that it's being rendered into a format that works. B, you got to have a platform that's going to get you where you need to be. You got to have something that's going to be able to take that data, make it sit up in Bark, make it meaningful, apply the appropriate content, apply the appropriate use cases, all those bits and pieces that'll get you there. C, you got to have the operational process. We talked about kind of how we do our threat analytics applications and all this kind of stuff, to the point where it's not flooding you with all those, the question there said, man, I'm drowning under alerts. Well, you shouldn't be necessarily. We're at a point in time where we can correlate this information. We can make it enriched. We can make it meaningful. We can tie this together to see things not as discrete points of view. There's a Chris Gray who's a user. There's a C Gray account. There's a Chris Gray account. There's a laptop number. There's an iPad. Chris at any point in time could do something and generate 4 alerts from using these 4 different accounts and platforms. No, there's one Chris Gray. That should be one alert that comes that says, this, in my case, this threat object is doing bad things. I should get ahead of this and look at what he's doing. This is the kind of stuff that's necessary, and it's advanced, and a lot of people have a hard time getting there, but there are solutions that are there, either internal or external, that can help reduce this number, get this down. But now we're going to get down to that. It's a common theme throughout this entire conversation. Your people. That's a lot of engineering. That's a lot of analysts. That's a lot of threat hunting. That's a lot of. Our average squad for every client, it's between 10 and 20 resources that know these people by name in order to do 24/7 by 365. Should your team be looking at this? Is this where you want them to be? Or should they be consuming the outcomes of the play that's being made here? And that's really a question that everyone has to ask themselves based on their risk profile, their threat tolerance, everything, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, how do you reduce it? You get the right data into the right system, being looked at by the right people, so that what comes across to you, really, when it gets across your desk, again, like I said, it's part of that 53%. I know I need to look at this, and I know that probably within a short amount of time, I'm going to be able to tell if it's real or not. Should I be looking at it or not? But then also, the data came across to me in a way that hits those other points we were talking about that are emerging. Does it support me immediately implementing my incident response process, implementing all my third-party risk management to where I can deal with the outcomes and decrease the dwell time, maximize the value of that golden hour of incident response? Is that what's getting there? So it's not just the question of, oh God, Chris, how do I deal with the flood? It's how do I make actionable results come from that flood, and how do I do it efficiently?
Yeah, and when you talk timelines, efficiencies, people, and I'll probably butcher this quote from you. I think you used it earlier. It's not hard work. It's difficult. Is that it, right? Or it takes
It's
time,
not,
or it's
it's
something.
not easy work. It's not hard work. It's just work that has to
Work,
be
right?
done. And so a lot of this is actually very hard work.
Right.
There's a lot of big brains involved and a lot of things going on. But the main thing to keep in mind is even when you have it down to a good process, even when you have your tools up and humming, even when you have your compliance frameworks going, it's just a lot of work. I don't know anyone who's ever told me in this industry, I have too many people.
Yeah.
I've got people who are just sitting around accomplishing nothing. I honestly don't think I've ever heard that said to me.
Yeah, that's the big, like the network effect that we can bring, the network effect, sorry, that we can bring, right? Where you really ramp that, instead of this being projects that take months and years, you can start measuring in weeks and days almost, right? Which is a real big impact to a lot of these systems of what's at stake.
Economy of scale is a real thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Another question, which kind of ties into this, because as you were talking about staffing, how do you recommend that organizations working on thin budgets hire and retain top talent? I like me personally, my anecdote to this one is if I'm doing the same thing every day, working on things that don't matter, I get burnt out really quick and I do not enjoy what I'm doing, right? When we talked about that, or you talked about the reduction from the 19,000 to 300 alerts that are actually meaningful to the business, just work satisfaction, right? Your analysts are actually handling the things that matter in these instances. They're not chasing, someone down in some dark room somewhere, just forgetting their password multiple times on multiple different devices. They're genuinely looking at the business impact and working on things that are meaningful. So I know that stands out as one of those things that really helps from just a job satisfaction standpoint. Because I think the easy answer is just throw a whole bunch of money at them, right? Everybody's got unlimited money. Just throw a bunch of money at them. People will stay if you pay them enough. But that's really not it. That's not the only way to do it, right?
No. I mean, at the end of the day, it's one of the things I've told my children, which is, be good at what you want to be good at. And a lot of the other things, why are you wasting your time doing a thing that it doesn't matter to you? So from a staffing perspective, job satisfaction is absolutely there. You need to remember the other one, though, that is rampant in our industry, and you can go and read on almost any industry site and you'll see it almost immediately. How many people in the cybersecurity field are quitting? We've got 70,000 open jobs, or whatever the number is, but how many people are leaving the industry? They say, I don't know that I actually know anybody. That's not to say anyone's lying. It just means I don't know anyone who's doing it. But this is not a low stress world that we live in. The old security cliche statement of, the bad guys only got to be right once, but the security team's got to be right every time. And 99.9%, whether we're talking about security in general or phishing in specific, still means that someone got your bank account. The success scale does not necessarily equate to the mitigation of impact. So not only is it hard to find people, not only do they have options, but this is a high stress job. And my team, we did everything great for 3 months. And then one bad day, of course, it was on a Friday on a 3-day weekend. It happened about 6 o'clock when everyone was just out of the office. We got popped. And now, oh my God, I got to call the whole team in and ruin everything. And because we got popped, the CIO, the CEO, the CTO, whomever, they're all looking at me going, why am I paying you when you let this happen to me? And again, that's an anecdotal statement. So no C-levels, please don't get mad at me. I'm just using it for the example. But the point being that one time I was wrong, I have to pay the whole bill.
Yeah.
So job satisfaction, the stress levels, all these can cause us issues. Again, then compared with the fact that there's a lot of companies hiring a lot of people in a lot of time. So how do you do it? Don't. Choose where you want to apply the personnel resources and put them there. If you have a security team that knows this and that's where you want to go, then let them do the high-end work. Let them be the liaisons they need to be. Let them be the compliance team that you need to be. Let them work in healthcare. Let them be the babysitters for the auditors that are undoubtedly coming to visit you every 15 minutes. This is what they're there for. This is what you need them doing. That's what they may be doing in the first place, as opposed to your SecOps, which is why you're flooded and you're not able to do your things. I bring that up, whether it's doing something like what I do, whether it's third-party risk management, whether it's vulnerability, wherever it goes. If this is not something that you have a driving need to put yourself there, then don't do it. Outsource it, give it to someone else. make sure that you include appropriate SLAs and penalties clauses and everything else to where I'm sharing the responsibility with you, and I have the ability to be punitive around bad activities where you're doing the wrong things. But that, again, I can stand up in court on that fateful day in front of the judge and say, Your Honor, I made a poor choice. You can call me stupid. You can't call me negligent. I did what I needed to do. I can do better. I will do better. But here we are. This is incredibly impactful. It's very meaningful on what you do. And it sounds like a simple decision. It's not. There's so much consideration that has to be done. But it really does come down to it. In a world where people are some of our shortest resources, well, you got to use them in an economic fashion. And just like you said, throwing money at it, if that works out for you, let me know.
Yeah, right. Or let me know if you're hiring, if you're just
exactly. Let me know what you're doing, because I mean,
yeah. I know we got a little bit of time left. I think we'll probably have time for two more here. So this next one here, my extended and local environments are a collection of every technology released in the last 15 years. How can I operate a modern security operations center, across so many different legacy platforms?
Rosetta Stone, back to where we went to before.
That's not one of the technologies, right?
Well, it kind of is. It kind of is. Amusingly enough, I didn't mean for it to be, but there are platforms, there are tools, there are intermediary solutions that play out in there. That some of their best selling points are the fact that I can take in so much source data and be able to manipulate it with I'm going to use the word minimal, and that is a huge sliding scale, but with what is hopefully a minimal level of constraint and resource spend on my side. They are there. And if you live in one of those environments where that is necessary, then you better choose that solution. In my past as a CISO, I know I bought a thing. I thought it was everything I needed. I'm not gonna lie, I was a young guy. I did not do my research well enough, and I realized about 2 weeks into it, this is completely missing the ability to integrate this huge portion of my network. I had the unenviable pleasure to be able to go to my CFO and say, I screwed up and need another $250,000. His reply to me involved a large number of pronouns and active verbs, and it was not a pleasant experience. But you can get ahead of that. As an example, we use Splunk. Splunk started off as an operational technology before it was security related. Some of their talking points are the any data from anywhere, the common information model that lets you read and index data on the fly as it comes in. It sits there and plays the Tetris game of IP address, name, activity, code, wherever it goes, and it plays that out. And that's the kind of stuff that's so critical, is because a bunch of this legacy information, a bunch of these OT systems, this was a platform that was built to support that. And it's not all going to fit. Let's not lie to one another. But the point of it being, those limited engineers I have, I would really, really, really a lot more have them working on mapping a few rogue pieces of technology to a common information model that I can apply to use cases than having to do every last one of them. Because again, my average client's bringing to me over 100 source types. I need 95% of those to be more or less SIM ready from the get. I don't need to have to spend that time. So when you're looking at your legacy environment, if, again, the rich example of throw money at it doesn't work, so you can't just replace it, well, then you've got to find a platform that can take it and understand it, so that, again, you might not be suffering from alert overload if you don't. Why? Because you're blind. You have no visibility. And the end result of that being, now you are tripping into that negligent space.
All right. And we'll hit on this last one because I know this is near and dear to your heart, GRC. I know you're getting excited. Compliance requirements just seem to be growing along with security threats. How do you help, or how do we help our customers get ahead of both?
All right. So understand that those two are twins. Again, and the naysayers will argue with me, but it's generally my opinion that compliance obligations come out because someone did the wrong thing, or what someone deemed to be the wrong thing. Half the reason that compliance obligations are coming out, that regulatory requirements are coming out, is because, right now, oh, we got breached. Hey, you should have gotten breached. Why did you get breached? Well, I was doing everything I had to do. Well, yeah, but this was bad and it's costing me a lot of trouble. I'm going to write a law about this to where you have to not let this happen again. It happens. That's where, a lot of governmental organizations and all this, the last thing they want to do is lay more requirements on someone that's going to cause increased expense, increased dissatisfaction, all these pieces. So how do I manage this combined landscape, which is security requirements and compliance obligations? The old security saw of compliance does not equate to secure. It's not true, but it's also not fully false. A lot of organizations, I was retail for a long time, and we didn't do anything. We didn't spend a nickel if we didn't have to, that did not result in someone taking a product off my shelf and giving me money for it. There's a lot of security stuff that we had to do when PCI came out that we would not probably have done otherwise, because to put it bluntly, I didn't have to. Overnight, however, that became requirements of my security program. And in my opinion, that was a good thing. That was really, it's something that needed to be done. We've talked about how the regulatory landscape is improving. It's going broader and broader, both from security from security operations and privacy and any other number of issues. How do I do it? A control requirement is a control requirement, whether it's a business need, whether it's something that PCI says, HIPAA says I got to do, whether or not I'm beholden to an organization that requires me to report through, the high trust framework, whatever it is, I've got to do these things. And there are, as I tell my children, there's what you want, there's what you need, and there's what you can live with. This is the same conversation. There are security controls I'd like to put in place. They're the ones that I have to put in place. And that can be due to compliance, or no, this is just hygiene. This has got to be done. There's no choice. If we don't do this, see comment a minute ago about negligence and the judge. And then there's the what we can live with, which is where we're combining those two, and we're setting out what is our minimal baseline of security controls that we're going to apply to our environments. That's really the way that I talk to people on this with regularity. A compliance requirement is a requirement. You have to do it. You have to report to it. You have to show progress against it. It's the same kind of governance that you should be doing for any other critical control that you have. Now, here's the kicker. It's also something that needs to be in your recipe. Whether you're doing it yourself or whether you're engaging a third party to do this for you. When you're putting together your RFI, your RFP, whatever this would be, internal or external, these things have to be something that is stated, understood, and it's a go, no go decision. This may be a binary factor that says you got to do this. Understand it, treat it like the obligation that it is, and then just go about your daily life of, I got to prioritize what I'm going to do, why I'm going to do it, and how much I'm going to apply to it, and knock it out. It sounds like a really simple answer, and it is, because it has not changed. But again, this is also a problem, if you see it as a problem, that hasn't gone away. There you go.
Awesome, man. Well, Chris, it's always a pleasure to sit down and chat with you about all kinds of things, this in particular being near and dear to our hearts, right?
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add before we wrap this up and move on?
So both a professional and a completely self-serving post that I bring out now to everyone. If this is something that's of interest to you, if you've got something you'd like to share with it and get back to us, I'd love to hear from you. Always, none of us are as dumb as all of us, as I'm fond of saying. So I'd love to hear this and get your opinions. Secondly, if we've said something today that really hammered home, it hit that, it sounded like a problem that you've got that you'd like to hear. Again, here's my self-serving Deepwatch pitch. We'd love to hear from you. Reach out. We'll have the conversation, help you understand how we understand this, how we're dealing with it in this space, and how hopefully we can help you to do better with less and achieve those outcomes that you're looking for.
Awesome, Chris. Well, it's been a pleasure. Like I said, thanks everybody for joining. We'll catch you on the next one.